Greetings, everybody. It's Monday morning here where I am. I'm probably going to post this in a couple days, though, because I already have things scheduled to go out. But as usually happens in the morning, my thoughts are just running all over the place. And I had some thoughts that I wanted to get down here into a voice note to share with you guys. I was reading a Substack, a new one that I'm following right now, with lots of really good information on the history of healing and the history of medicine. And it's really, the thing that impresses me about this moment in time is that there seems to be a movement happening where, because of platforms like Substack and YouTube and probably other platforms that I don't even know about, we have the ability to share information and knowledge that has been suppressed for a really long time. On the topic of healing, my grandfather was a chiropractor. And when I say that today, I always feel like I have to give a little extra note, because when I think of chiropractors today, I see very sterile offices that look just like a regular doctor's office, except this guy cracks your back or cracks pops other bones, joints, and there might be a massage therapist on site. But other than that, that's not the kind of chiropractor my grandfather was. I call him a holistic healer. He was a naturopath before it was possible to become a naturopath in America. I mean, even today, it's very strange to be a naturopath. I've met quite a few. In fact, I met one over the weekend. We were hosting her from Italy. And I'm always amazed when I meet one. Even though I've met several in my life, we still live in a time where, even though there is this great movement of people who are out there getting training, who are working professionally in these so-called alternative health fields, and there are people on Substack and on YouTube who are sharing their information, and there are people who are signing up to learn from these channels and platforms, it still feels like still doesn't really feel that much different to me than when it was the 90s. And so what I mean by that is, first of all, I was a teenager in the 90s. So my experience and knowledge base is different from somebody who is older, who would have had more life experience by then, who would have been working a full-time job at that point, maybe having a family and seeing the world differently. I was having my awakening, though, in those years, and I credit my grandfather for that. I got a lot of his information within my DNA. The last time I saw him was in 1988. So I didn't have him in my life in the 90s, but his essence was in me. He passed down a lot of information, which made me begin to ask questions about the health system that we currently had in place at that time. And in the 90s, there was this momentum of this movement that I just referred to, of people who are in the so-called alternative health fields. And it was becoming very popular for mainstream channels. Like Oprah Winfrey was a big supporter of these people. And so you started to see books at the bookstore, which I worked at a bookstore, and I was watching actively how popular these books were. And I was living in a very, very Christian, conservative area. Very, very conservative. And it was very popular where I lived too. And so that told me something, that something was happening. But today, what blows me away is that even though the fact is that the world is more open It is more open to these ways of viewing the world, but it doesn't feel like that. And I wonder, do you feel that way too? Let me know in the comments. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, even though there's evidence in front of me that the world has moved in a more open direction where we can actually have the conversation about Western medicine versus Eastern medicine, we can even find the information about how the medical industry was established. But it still feels like if you're in the camp that I'm in, which is what we've been called the alternative health camp, which I don't like because I don't actually agree with it. I think it's an inversion of the truth. I think that we are actually the norm. Like, we are actually part of, like, this is how human beings are supposed to approach healing. What is called the alternative is actually ancient, whereas the Western medical system is new, is the alternative. It did not come about until the industrial age began. But anyway, that's just the world we live in. But what I'm saying is, do you get what I'm saying? Do you feel like even though the world has woken up a lot more, and the evidence is right in front of me, considering that we have an era of the internet where now, unlike the 90s, where you had to rely on publishing companies and people like Oprah Winfrey and other celebrities to get your message out there, now we have this world where we have online platforms where not only can you share the information and wisdom and knowledge that you have on the topic of healing, but you can actually make a good living. There are actually ways to do that. People are doing it through, paid memberships and coaching and paid Substacks. And I'm sure there are lots of other methods that are just not at the front of my mind. So the evidence says that we are in a more open-minded world, but I still don't feel like it. I still don't feel that way. And I don't know if that's because my messaging got solidified in my adolescence. So during a time when it really was the alternative in the minds of the mainstream culture. And it still feels that way to me, but I could be wrong. What do you think? I want to hear your thoughts on this topic. And then another thing that I started thinking about as reading this Substack, which a reader, or a listener, I should say, shared his Substack with me, and I started reading all these articles, and I really enjoyed them very much. And there was one mention of Chiron. I'll leave the link, by the way, in the show notes. But there was a mention of Chiron, and in a totally different context than I tend to think of Chiron, because I think of Chiron as the way astrology defines Chiron, which in this context, Chiron was still described as a healer type of character. In astrology, Chiron is the wounded healer. Chiron represents, when you look at your chart, Chiron is meant to show you where your deepest wounding lies. And so depending on where it's placed, you can reveal a certain truth about your greatest sensitivities, your greatest vulnerabilities. But the beautiful thing about Chiron, and it is one of my favorite archetypes and one of my favorite things to look for when I'm reading somebody's chart, is as you go through the life journey, as you go through the healing path, what I am starting to reference as the hero's journey in my method here, as you go on this path, which is a lifelong process, you will start to be faced with the shadows of your greatest wounding. That's the Chiron energy within you, the Chiron archetype. But as you continue to persevere and heal, each time you heal one of these vulnerabilities, one of these sensitivities, one of these wounds, it will be transformed into a healing superpower. So the thing that hurt you, once it becomes healed, it alchemizes into a healing force. So I'll give you an example in my own life. So in my chart, my Chiron is in Taurus, and Taurus rules the voice. Taurus is also representative of material appreciation for the material world, appreciation for luxury, an appreciation and a deep need for beauty. So it's actually a very feminine placement. And when I saw this in my chart, I was like, of course, it made complete sense to me. My greatest power has always been my voice. I've always had a deep appreciation for beauty in the material form, whether it's art, music, beauty in people, fashion, styling one's body with jewelry or makeup. And of course, the voice in Taurus, it also represents the core identity. So feeling totally confident in your identity and who you are. And I would say that for most of my life, that was my greatest challenge, to feel comfortable with all of these things. My voice, my love of beauty, my desire to be a unique individual who's comfortable expressing that. And these things were always challenged along my path. They always have been challenged. And even today, I face these challenges, although I do feel like I got myself to a point where I'm very comfortable being myself now. And now that I have gotten to that point where I've healed a lot of the wounds around that Taurus expressed version of Chiron. So the wounded healer filtered through the character of Taurus, the great lover of beauty, of feminine beauty, of the voice. I now am sharing that wisdom with others. And that's the energy of Chiron. So I wanted to share this with you because I wanted you to think about this in terms of your own voice. And especially in terms of expression, sharing emotion with people through your voice. Because as a voice teacher, this is something that I struggle with in teaching people. And I also see in the culture that there is a deadening of expression. What I mean by that is, one of the things that makes somebody a beautiful singer or an impressive orator is an ability to connect their deepest emotions to their voice. So I'll give you some examples. In terms of orators, I think of Martin Luther King. He's the first person I always think of because he's universally known. And I could actually think of many, many people from where I grew up who you've never heard of. So I think of Martin Luther King because he is from the South. He was a preacher. And that's where I grew up around a lot of people in that world. And so the culture where I grew up around had a lot of that influence. And so it was just very normal to be very expressive, and it wasn't seen as a bad thing at all. When I moved to California, Southern California, but even Northern California, I lived for a few years, and I saw it to an even more extreme degree. a deadening of emotional expression in the voice, particularly among younger people. I worked with a lot of teenagers throughout my career, and the California dialect, if you will, especially for young people over the last 2 decades or so, has always been one of like, California chill. Like, we don't go any higher than this. And like, we don't show any excitement. We just are, we're just so chill. We're just so relaxed. Like, nothing ever phases me. Like, that's what I've heard. That's the sound in people's voices. Of course, that is a younger population. I don't hear that in grown-ups. But even the grown-ups I've known, a lot of the culture over here has always been just not as expressive as what I'm used to, either when I go home to Florida or if I'm in the South, anywhere else. Even the East Coast, like even the Northeast, when I'm around New Yorkers or people in Philadelphia, even they're more expressive. And when I go to Italy, oh my God, like forget about it. It's insane. It's off the charts expression. There's a connection between emotion and voice. And I feel like the California way of speaking has become more and more mainstream, and it's influencing the culture. So when I hear music, and I've been noticing this for many years, this is not new, I feel like we've reached a fever pitch though, where the deadening of emotional expression in the voice has reached a level that I find deeply concerning. I was concerned about it 10 years ago, and now I'm at the point where I feel regret for not saying anything 10 years ago in a public fashion. I mean, like I'm saying right now. I feel guilty about it. I feel like I've had a responsibility for a long time to do something, and I haven't. The only thing that I have done is I've worked with private voice students and have attempted to bring more life to their voices. But I'm at a point now where I feel like I can't really help my private students because they have grown up in a culture, and a lot of our voice comes from our culture, our environment. And so I can't undo the culture that people were brought up in. Where I grew up, my teachers didn't have to teach us about emotional expression. It was just natural. And if you didn't have it when you sang, you didn't go far at all. The only people who rose up to the top were the ones who had the most emotion. I do feel, to be fair, that people still appreciate emotion in voice. And so when you do hear singers today who have a lot of emotion, they do go far. And so that's one of the reasons I'm sharing this information with you. As somebody who is working on your voice actively, whether it is through speech, as an actor, a motivational speaker, a lawyer, a teacher, or as a singer, as somebody who is aspiring to have an audience, a fan base, a presence online, a career, you have to be comfortable putting your emotions totally in sync with your voice. And that requires confidence and comfort with yourself and with what you value. If you value emotional expression, if you value beauty, then you will be able to overcome whatever it is that's blocking this emotional expression. That's my hope for you. And that is my hope for the culture in general, for the greater society, because I do not want to live in a world where everybody has this just very calm and relaxed, like nothing is bothering me. Like, I don't want to live in a world like that. I don't want to be totally surrounded by people who just don't care about anything, or at least make such an effort to pretend like they don't care, because I don't believe I don't believe that people really don't care. I think that it's just the energy of your environment affects you. You learn how to behave. You learn what to express and what not to express. And our voices reveal a lot. And so if you're living in an environment where people are not able to express their emotions through their voices, then what are you to do? It takes a very unusual type of personality to be like, well, I don't care. I'm not going to be like that. Usually, I've been in many situations where I am the odd person. So I could be in a room full of 20 people and be the only one who's willing to express myself honestly. I've been that person many times. And so I know that it's hard for people. But what I have learned being in this situation many times is that it only takes one person. Because once you decide to show yourself as you really are, and you do it in an authentic way, and you do it with kindness and compassion, I'm not talking about bullying people into accepting your identity. I think that's nonsense. And I do think that we've seen a lot of that in the world for a while, and I don't like it. And nobody likes it, by the way. We still have to treat everybody with dignity and compassion, even as we become more sovereign, more comfortable, and more authentic. So I hope that this has given you something to think about. I hope that when you're doing your vocal practices and you're feeling the vibrations of your voice and you're feeling the effects it has on your body, that you will also pay attention to the emotions that it stirs up in you. Feel those feelings and begin to connect those feelings to the sound of your voice and notice what they feel like. Notice what it sounds like. Notice how people react. I'm going to leave you with that. If you are stuck, if you are blocked, and you need help uncovering these emotions from within you, if you are also going through this healing process similar to Chiron, where you are working through your deepest wounds because you know that you have a purpose, you know that when you heal these things, that you will be able to help other people. Because that's ultimately what this is about. This is not a purely selfish journey. It has to be that way at first. You have to focus on yourself a lot in order to heal these wounds. But then after you start to make progress, then you can use those powers to help other people who are struggling along the way. And that's really what this is about. Thanks so much for listening. And if you are struggling with all this, of course, check out my voice liberation course. Or if you just want to enhance your process, I'm putting all of the information that I've gathered throughout the years, all the practices, all the techniques I've been using for my private students and myself. I'm putting them all into a 7-week course, and you can get it for 50% off until February 7th when it launches officially, and then it will go to the full price. So check out that link in the description, and I'll talk to you guys later.